All right, so this clay, I haven't forgotten about it. It's sometimes really nice to have a very soft clay with a lot of moisture to it, especially for sculpting and for like sculpting animal forms. So this will be really hard. Well, let's see. I could try pulling some of this up. Some of this has absorbed the moisture. What I could do, you can see it's actually pulling up kind of nicely here because it's actually absorbed. So it just depends on how much the plaster has absorbed. And then what I take is this wet clay that you can see has a bunch of holes and air bubbles in it. But once I start wedging it, it might make some fun squishy noises. You'll start to see that this clay starts to get more firm, right? So it's actually, you can see the texture of the clay is changing. You heard an air bubble pop. So all those air bubbles will start to come out. And then let's say you have a clay that's a little bit too dry and there's some clay here, you can actually wedge that in. So I can even probably even try wedging and picking up this clay. It's gonna pick it up nicely. So it's really amazing. This is also what we do when we recycle clay, is that we put very sloppy clay and we put it here on the wedging table, and the next day we wedge it up to make clay for the day. Don't worry, you will not miss out on the fun. Okay, so here you can see that it's changing. It's still a lot softer than this clay here. This one's a little bit firmer, but they're both really, really great to work with. So as you start to work with the clay, you'll start to realize that you might prefer a wetter clay for certain types of sculpting, or maybe for your pinch pots, or maybe you prefer a firmer clay, which would be, this would be maybe more of a clay that you would use for making slabs and coils. And so this could be a really great clay for sculpting. They're both really nice and soft. So here I can keep wedging it. So now I'm actually gonna take a little bit of this firmer clay, because this clay is pretty soft, so I can wedge that up a little bit more later. I'm gonna take some of this firmer clay because I can add more moisture to it. And with time, you'll be able to wedge larger pieces of clay, but I'd recommend starting more small until you build your confidence. So you can hear it's making all that fun smacking noises. So you want to do is you want to pick up as much of the clay off the wedging table by wedging first. Okay, so this is actually working pretty nicely. Now, these are some chunkies. I could take my fingers flat and kind of scrape off a little bit of those chunkies. I do not have long nails, so you don't want to scratch your nails on the surface. We really want to keep, we do not dig, we do not bring tools over to here. We do not cut clay on the wedging table. This is only a surface for wedging clay and for recycling clay. Now, we also do not want this to dry up. We never, 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 never scrape dry clay. We never scrape dry clay off of the plaster, and we never scrape dry clay off of bats. We always, always work with the clay when it's wet. Okay, so I know that that's an important safety feature in ceramics. So this is fine. I can kind of push up this clay on the surface. If I wedge it, I might even be able to pick up even more of the clay off the surface of the wedging table. So now, while the clay is still on here and it's still pretty wet, I could let it dry, but what we could do is that if we are going to do some scraping on it, we will get small amounts of plaster. So you can scrape the surface lightly, but it's possible that this clay may get a little bit of plaster in it. So what we recommend is that you just throw these little boogers away, because what happens is that the clay will be fired over 1,000 degrees. And the only thing that survives after 1,000 degrees, over 1,000 degrees, is your clay and not the plaster. So I don't know if I see any little bits. Yeah, there's a little bit of plaster in there. So you just take it and you throw it away. We're not recycling that.
No good.
Later, to clean the wedging table, all that you do is you have a wet sponge and you basically rub off the rest of the clay bits. And this is something that could be done at the end of the period because we're adding a lot more water onto the plaster and we're going to kind of need this surface to be active for other students to use. So also always talk to Mr. Matt because he knows what's best for whatever activity you're doing for that day. So that is how we take care of this wonderful, beautiful wedging table that is the backbone of a ceramics classroom.